Hello, everyone, and welcome to NapKim Math. I remembered to unmute myself this time. Gotta find a little humor in it. Um, my name is Kim, and if you haven't been to NapKim Math before, I am going to be showing how I'm analyzing data we collect on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Balatro on Saturdays. So I'm excited you're here. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. And I just want to give you a little bit of background for those of you who might be tuning in that might not be as interested in Balatro data or Balatro gameplay. So, my day job, I'm a business intelligence engineer. So that means that I connect the business to the data. I derive insights, play with spreadsheets, write a lot of SQL, which is structured querying language. And I wanted to make sure that I found something that I really understood well and was really excited about to create kind of like a portfolio project for myself, but also to show other people how you can create your own data if there's not something already there for you. It's really helpful because when you have a data set that you're super familiar with, or you at least understand what's going into the data, you're able to create something that's really impactful. You're able to answer questions really easily, find interesting insights that you might not have been able to otherwise. And so I'm really excited to show you what I've been building. So on last Saturday, last Tuesday, and then last Thursday, we played 3 games of Balatro. I was able to track 2 games in full. I had to modify how I was collecting data because right now I'm doing it all manually for visual purposes, and how I was originally planning on it was a little too much for me. And so I scaled back a little bit and focused on what was the most important for me to collect. And that way, if I can figure out a way to create a mod that will collect data for me, or use a something that we can build in Python together, or an API of some sort, we can potentially do that as well. But I was talking to one of my coworkers about this, and she asked me how I started building my data set, because that is something that can be super difficult, especially if you're starting from scratch. Now, if I had access to an API or data that I wasn't really building myself, then I probably would have collected the data first and then built the reference data afterwards. But because I knew kind of where I needed to go, and I wanted to make sure that when I was putting the data together, it was all structured well, and I wasn't misspelling things or spelling things differently or structuring things a different way. I actually started with the reference data first. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can get to that data, but I'm going to show you how I did it, which whatever data set you want to look into, there's probably either reference data or data that you can create very easily by yourself. So I'm going to switch to my browser. I actually started with the Balatro wiki. It's open source, it's fantastic, has a ton of information. And so you're able to get a lot of data that is really helpful in your data set that we're building. And so I'm going to go to the Jokers page, for example. So in order to understand the impact of the jokers you're playing, it is helpful to get what each joker does, the name of each joker, any particular values that you might need. And so thankfully, the Balatro wiki has a very nifty table format. Can scroll over a little bit. My Mac bar is in the way. There we go. So there's a bunch of different columns that you can collect. And so I literally just highlighted, copied, pasted it into a Google Doc or Google Sheets. And this way, when I structure my data set, I can um, use these to determine how the jokers impacted my play. And so I have, if we scroll down to the very bottom, we got 150 jokers. It tells you their name, their effect, how much they cost, their rarity, unlock, joker type, how they act. And then I also added in additional data myself. So I added in the base chips, base multiplier, and then the base times multiplier, so that I could help myself as I'm building this up. Now, I may be a little crazy for doing all of this to build out a data set for something like this, but I have a lot of fun in doing this and really enjoy doing things like this. And I really enjoy teaching people how to do this because I think one of the things that is very difficult to learn sometimes is how to understand the data. Like, I know a lot of people who write excellent SQL, but if they can't understand the data, then they're not going to be able to derive any interesting insights. So I kind of wanted to show how to connect to the business, which in this case is just Balatro. So I use that site to gather reference data for, I'm going to go back to our main screen. For our jokers, our decks, the poker hands and how the planets can scale them, any card modifiers, what you can get in the shop, stakes, blinds and antes, tags, all the way down to the consumables. And that way I could potentially track how things were going in a couple different ways. So I'm not going to show you every single data set that I pulled from here because that's not the meat of um, what we're going to be doing. And honestly, watching someone copy paste is not a lot of fun. But I have the information in here with, what I pulled. Now that once I had my reference data, I was able to start structuring my gameplay data. And my gameplay data actually changed a couple different times. I originally had a couple ideas of how I was going to build it, but I basically built 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think 10 different like play tables, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to have one row per whatever I'm looking at. So in my run data, I want one row per run. So a run is a game in Balatro. So a game start to finish is just one run. So in this table, I have one row for each of the 3 games I played. I'm able to create information that I know that basically roll up to one game. So if I won or lost the game, what deck we played. You can't play more than one deck in the same run. What stake we're playing, that tells you the difficulty and some of the constraints that you have. The Joker name in this sheet tells us what Jokers we had if we won at the end of ante 8. So those are the Jokers that get a sticker that say you won the game with these Jokers. One of the achievements that you can get in Balatro is if you get all of your Jokers having a gold sticker, which is the highest difficulty, along with some other things that help you get there, can help you get to Completionist Plus or Completionist Plus Plus. And so this can help me track when I'm getting those stickers and what Jokers I actually get a lot of stickers on. Now you can also unlock Jokers, vouchers, and decks by completing certain things in the game. So I think, let's see, some of these decks, if you get past a certain ante in the game, they unlock, or If you win a certain stake, they unlock. The jokers, like I know Glass Joker, which we unlocked on Tuesday, you have to have 5 glass cards in your deck. And then once you have that for the first time, you unlock that Joker. And so I'm tracking when I unlock all the different Jokers, vouchers, and decks as well. Now, you may see all these little drop downs. And before we go further into the columns, I do want to point out that I made reference drop downs for all the different things that I wouldn't want to type in every single time. I tend to misspell things sometimes, and when you're building a data set, you don't want to misspell things because when you want to connect, say, your run data to your round data, you want to make sure that anything that is in common between those two tables that you want to join on is spelled the same and spelled like has the same capitalization, everything. Otherwise, it's not going to merge well together. And so we have things like what you can buy in the shop at a high level, and then all the individual items. This is just a list of all the consumables and all the jokers. This is just all the consumables. These are things that can change jokers, can change cards. And when I go into create these drop downs, you can I created them in 2 different ways. So we're going to look at the win column first because that one is pretty straightforward. I'm going to highlight the entirety so it doesn't yell at me. Go all the way down to the bottom. If you right click and click on drop down, the range that we just selected will be what you're applying your range to, and then it'll give you some criteria. For me, it was going to be easiest to do a drop down because that way I would make sure that everything was named the same and I didn't have any problems listing them out. And so you just type in true, false. For these, I changed the color. You don't need to. If I wanted to add anything else like unknown, could add that in there, or I could just delete it. And you can also change the order that these show up in your drop down. Now for true false, whether you won the run or not, you don't need multiple selections, but for things like our jokers, when we have multiple jokers at the end of a game, we do want to select multiple. So I'm going to show you how I set up the joker column now. If you go to your drop downs, instead of creating a drop down where I type in every single one, that would be horrible because there's 150 jokers and all of these columns have different constraints, and so that would have not been manageable. I always work smarter, not harder. And so the drop down we created in this tab is used for a lot of things that can change. But because my jokers are always going to be a joker, there's not any other thing that I'm adding in here. I actually just select my data, went to my joker reference sheet that I got from the Balatro wiki, and I just selected from B2, which is the first joker name, all the way down to B151, which is Perkio. And that references the row number, not the ID that I put in here. Now, anytime you change these, you don't have to type this in. If you like click on it and drag, it'll select what you want. The only thing that I did add in are these $signs, which tell me I don't want it to be changing when I'm moving around. And so that was just a peace of mind for me that it wouldn't change if I was in a different place, but you don't necessarily need to do that. And once I selected that, it populated the list of all my jokers in order, and as I was going through and doing some inputting after some of my games, I did realize that I had to change seance because it has an accent in the second letter, and I wasn't able to search for it easily. And so I just made it super simple by taking out the accent. But that was just a quirk that I found, because if you want to input anything, you don't have to like scroll through and search for it. You can start typing, and it'll look for the first letter in each of the words. So, like if I was typing in seance, it now pops up, and you see it still picks up the sixth sense because the second word starts with SE. However, if SE was just somewhere else within the word, it wouldn't pop up. It has to be letters that you have to start at the beginning of a word to use the search. So I set up all those drop downs to help get that information going. I made sure that we're collecting our seed as well, because that's always important. People love to know what seed you played so that they can potentially play it too. I have my start timestamp and my end timestamp to help me understand how long these games are taking. Obviously, the first game, as we were going through, took an hour and a half, but I was also explaining a lot of things because I knew that there would be some people who hadn't seen Balatro before, and every game has actually gone quicker. So I'll continue to do that. And how I set these up is if I click on one of the timestamps, I just have equals now, open parentheses and parentheses. And anytime I update the um, spreadsheet, that will change. So when I want to save that, I just copy and then paste values so that it keeps the value that it was when I pasted. Otherwise, it'll change every single time, which for our second run, I forgot to paste values. And the date is also using now. And again, that's just a copy paste value thing. And I also initially didn't have this data in here, but it's the data that's on the end screen when you win the game. And so I just am typing out everything on that end screen. So we have our best hand score, what our most played hand is, how many times you played that, how many cards you played, how many cards you discarded, how many you purchased, how many times you re-rolled, the new discoveries, the ante you made it to, the round you made to, how what you were defeated by, how much money I ended up with, and then any Steam achievements I got at the end of the game. And these aren't necessary for what I'm doing. However, they are a great way for me to validate what I'm doing. And so I was able to, after my first run, after I finally finished inputting all the data, I was able to check and see that my most played hand was, in fact, a two pair, and that I played it 12 times. So this is a great way to sanity check what I'm doing. Now we can go on to the round. So within every run, you have a round, which is basically what you have to defeat to move on. And every round has a specific score you have to get. You have basically a blind that tells you how difficult it is and if there are any special constraints. There's a tag associated with it for small and big blinds. So if you skip the blind, then you get a reward that's based off of the tag that shows up. The tag effect, um, I'm keeping that for anything I skip for the most part, unless it is something to do with money. I'll grab that too sometimes. And then having what the round score was and ending money as well. I do have a column that I haven't used yet for Joker effect. So like if I have Chico and my boss blinds are all disabled, I was thinking about figuring out a way to put that in there as well. But I have what run all of this is associated with, what ante it is in. So there's generally, well, there's 3 rounds in an ante. And so each of the round numbers as they go up will get an incremental number. However, when you skip a round, because we skipped these 2 in a row, the next round you play will actually get a 4. And so I added in A and B after 3 to make sure that we still captured that. We skipped it and we got something from it, but we didn't use the 4. Now, this is actually where I made the most changes since I set this up, because I was originally capturing every single card, every single discard, every single card held in your hand, both like the value of the card, if it had any modifiers on it, and that became very overwhelming. And so really what I'm capturing is within your run, the hand ID, which is just concatenating together or joining together your round ID um, with what hand in your round it is. So let's go down to something that has a couple. So in run 1, ante 3, round 6, we had 3 different hands. And so they'll get hand 1, hand 2, hand 3. And you can join these together by saying equals and then your D column value, use an ampersand to concatenate together, and then put any text you want in double quotes. So I have double quote dash H and double quote to get that dash H right here, and then another ampersand to your E column to join them all together. And in here, we have a list of the jokers that we have during every hand in order that they're in our joker slots. So you can see as we add more jokers, the list gets longer. But that also helps understand how we got to the score that we got. We do have a spot for what consumables we hold, and that's especially important for certain jokers, but that I'd usually, at least for these, I haven't started out with holding too many in my hand, so it's not super populated. And if I have more than one, I'm just going to put a comma separated list of how many of each I have. Then within our hand, what poker hand we actually played, how many discards we used within that hand, our chip total for that hand, our multi-total for that hand, and the hand score at the for those. And for the most part, it's 77 times 4. However, there are a couple of different decks, like the plasma deck, which is my favorite deck actually, that do some math to get to a different score. So they would average out, well, basically, yeah, average out those 2 numbers and then multiply the averages together, which is pretty cool. But one thing I realized, especially when you start getting like steel jokers or steel cards and jokers that have times multi that aren't a whole number, the score is interesting because they always take the floor of the score. So that means that if we have a decimal, when you multiply your chips and your multi together, you just cut off the decimal. You don't round up, you just cut it off. That's something cool that I learned. Also, once your multi for your hand gets over a certain value, it won't show the decimal points anymore. And so that is also interesting to make sure that you capture the hand score and divide it by the chips to get to the multi if it starts getting too big for you to capture. Also have money that's earned based off your hand, and if you earn any money, what you have at the end of that hand. Yeah, integer versus float, sort of. I think it's just you can't have partial chips in poker, and so you just take the number of whole chips that you have. And so you don't want to have floats within your scores at the end of the round. And so I think that was just an easy way for them to do that. Good question. I'm also capturing what shows up in the shop. And so each of the shops are getting their own ID. So you generally have like 2 Jokers, planets, tarets, any of those in one shop, 1 voucher, and then 2 booster packs, at least to start. And so I'm capturing what type they are, and then the individual items, and then how much they cost. And once we start finding, like our 8-ball was a negative Joker, and it was actually free because we skipped one of the rounds to get the negative tag. You have your additions, seals, any enhancements or stickers as well. And then just a true false, whether it was purchased or not. And then if I re-rolled, saying what re-roll each of the cards were associated with, and then the cost is just associated with the first card that shows up in the re-roll. That way you don't double count your re-roll cost. And then if you were to open a booster pack, you capture what cards show up within there as well. And so our first game, we actually got our first booster packs from tags. And they were, the first one was a celestial pack, so we had planet cards. And so capturing what shows up within those booster packs, and then true false whether we selected them or not. Then I also keep track of my jokers when I get them. So when it's first available is either going to be a shop or a hand. Last available if it's sold, destroyed, anything like that. And then if I don't think, okay, so Fibonacci in our second game, we turned negative. And so let's see, Fibonacci is right here. And so when it turned negative, I put last available for the shop ID where that happened. And then in down here, I created a new record tying it to the original Joker ID. And said it was changed based off of ectoplasm because ectoplasm is one of the spectral cards that can change a Joker, and then it changed to negative. Also capturing if they're last available just because I sold it to make room for another Joker, that I sold it, and the selling value. And like for Diet Cola, if I sell it to create a double tag, I have that in here as well if there's a selling effect. Our consumables, so our planet cards, tarots, spectrals, I'm keeping track of those in here as well. And so what I got, how I got it, whether I used it or sold it, or basically if I didn't use it and it was at my in my hand at the end, that would just be held. What type of card it affected. So like our Grim destroys one random card in your hand and then creates 2 enhanced aces. And so it affected our 9 of clubs. That's the one it destroyed and created a multi-ace of hearts and a ace of clubs that is steel. I had to create acronyms to make it a lot easier. If we end up selling it, getting the sold value, and if it is something like the Hermit where you double your money, getting whatever money you earned. I also keep track of all the playing cards. Everything will have, well, most decks will start with 52 cards at the beginning, besides our abandoned deck and maybe some of the challenge decks. And so I have a card name for each of them, where tens are the only ones that are a little different, just because all the other ones have a value that's either one letter or one digit. And so for tens, I use X because that's Roman numeral. But all our initial ones are tied to initial. If they're changed or destroyed in any way, keeping track of when that happens. And so, like our nine of clubs that was destroyed by Grim, we have that it was last available um, based off of that pack that we got from skipping a blind, and it was destroyed by Grim. And then down here, we have that we added those two aces that we just talked about from Grim. We have changing a Jack of Hearts and a Nine of Diamonds from the Magician to Lucky cards. And like if you change a card, I'm tying it back to the original card as well. So like our Jack of Hearts was tied to our Lucky Jack of Hearts was tied to originally our 15th card. And so when that was changed to a lucky card, we have that last available. I have anytime that we change our chips and multi based off of mainly planet cards, but there are some other things that can change what we're getting when we play a hand. And so just tracking that when it happens. And chance is where I'm still working out some little kinks, but I'm really just tracking right now glass and lucky cards because our Wheel of Fortune, that'll be tracked in the consumables. Most of our other chances will happen in other places. There are a couple like 8 Ball that I don't track right now. I don't think I really care to because that would take a lot of paying attention and making sure to capture every single time it happens. But basically capturing how many times like I played glass cards in the first run and how many times they broke, or how many times I played lucky cards and how many times for this I got $20, or down here that I got 20 added to the multi. So I know that was a lot, but that is my current data setup. So now let me take a sip of water because I've been talking for a long time. And let me now show you all how we're going to be analyzing it. Let me first show you just something really quick and easy within Google Sheets. Because again, these are all free tools that you don't have to pay for, you don't have to download anything for, and you can do a lot of what you need to directly in Google Sheets. People joke about not wanting to create a database in spreadsheets. It's not a good practice, but for something like this where you're just creating something to learn, to grow, to show some of your skills, it's a great way to do it without having to create something that's huge or that you don't understand. Because before I started doing this, I was looking at some of the public data sets available in BigQuery, and like I was using Stack Overflow data to write some queries. And yes, I could write queries based off of it, but and yeah, I understand Stack Overflow enough to understand the relationships, but I I didn't feel like I could answer any questions that came up if anybody had any. And so that's just something that I was cognizant of, and I'm trying to make sure that um, I can defend anything I write or any code I write or anything I say as well. But I always encourage you to question everything I show you, use resources to look stuff up, because um, I am just one person with one opinion. And so it's always good to check things out. So I'm actually going to look at two different things from our hand data. And so I'm going to create a pivot table, which will help us do a little bit of analysis. So I'm going to click on the top left corner here, click Insert, and then go to Pivot Table. And I'm just going to create it on a new sheet because it will make it a little bit easier. And this basically helps you aggregate your data for different sums, averages, all of those. So let's see. I can track within well, first I want to filter because we haven't finished filling out anything beyond runs 1 and 2. So I'm going to filter out our value that doesn't really exist. So it's only going to show data for runs 1 and 2. And then I'm going to look at, I'm going to put runs in my columns. So we have runs 1 and run 2. I'm going to take off my totals. You'll see why in a second. And then I'm going to put hand and round in rows. Actually, no. I'm going to put round and run ID. So this basically tracks all the different rounds we have in order within our runs. I'm going to take show totals off as well. And I'm going to add our hand score. Just going to drag that over to our values. So this shows how our scores are increasing for the most part by round within our runs. Now, a table is not very easy to look at. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select or highlight the data that I want to show, insert a chart, and it's going to show me a line chart of how those scores increase over time. And so I'm going to customize this and call it runs 1 and 2 hand scores, just to make it a little bit easier. And if you're looking at this, you're probably like, well, that doesn't really tell me much because of this big spike at the end of run 2. And so what we can do is edit our chart. And let's say we only really want to capture, let's see, let's go to 20, because that will pretty much capture all of our hands that are within ante 8, I believe. That might be off by a little bit based off of how many times you skip, but we'll do that. So we'll go to round 20, and so that corresponds with row 22 over here. And so I'm just going to change my data range from 31, which is at the very end of the table, to 22. And that'll cut some of the end pieces off of our runs, or some of our runs off of our chart, especially the ones that scale and make it very difficult to see trends. So it's actually interesting because in our first run, we were consistently scoring higher, but then we failed. Because I'm pretty sure like one of these is where we hit our flush house and our 4 of a kind, but then because we didn't have jokers that scaled well, we kind of just couldn't go any further. But our run 2 was a little bit more consistent and more steady. So it is interesting to see, and we can look at how these can change over time, especially once we have a lot more runs to look at. I think, oh, there was another one that I wanted to look at. And so I'm going to create another pivot table, except this time I'm going to go to my existing sheet that I already created, and I'm just going to put it on the right over here. Oh, so I have to select and then say what destination first. And so it's just going to create a new pivot table for me. And so I want to do the same thing where I filter first, take my run ID down to my filters, take out any runs that we haven't actually done yet. And then I want to know what poker hands I've played the most. So we're going to put our poker name in our rows. I'm going to, our hand ID is going to be a unique value. And so in our values, I'm going to drag it there. And I'm going to count unique. And so we actually played 100 hands between the two runs. And we can sort by within our rows here. I'm going to sort by our count unique and sort descending to have our highest values first. And so, as expected, 2-pair was our most played hand, and flush was in second. And our flush house and 5 of a kind we played once. Now I can also see if I drag my hand score in values, I want to know on average what do I get from playing each of those. I know it's not going to be perfect because you do have different rounds that you have different jokers for, but it is interesting to see, you know, our 4 of a kind got us a ton of points, and so that average is a lot higher than some of the others. Let's actually sort now by the average hand score. And so our 4 of a kind, we did play it 3 times. And so because those were all super high scoring, that brought our average up. And surprisingly, 2-pair is still pretty high. Where high card, not surprising, that is the lowest scoring hand. We only played it once. And so the average is just what we got for that hand. So this is pretty interesting to see how we're doing. Now gets to the really fun part. We're going to move over to BigQuery. And before I do that, I'm just going to show you one of the things that I am making sure to do is for anything that is not going to change, so like our reference tables, I go and download as CSV so I can just bring that into BigQuery instead of connecting to a Google Sheet. But I'll show you how to do both. So I'm going to switch over to my BigQuery tab, and I'm going to make sure to put this link in the descriptions for all of these, but it's just console.cloud.google.com/BigQuery. And I do want to point out that BigQuery has a sandbox that is free to use to a certain point. And so you don't have to enter any credit card information, so don't worry about that. I'm not paid or sponsored by them in any way. I'm just super comfortable using BigQuery because that's what I use at work, and that's why I'm using it. And so if you have a different tool that you use and you're more comfortable with, don't feel like you need to use BigQuery. Explore, see what works best for you, because a lot of the different databases do have free options, especially for exploration. So when you go to that for the first time, you'll need to basically say what country you're in and agree to terms. And then it'll ask you to create a new project. And so my project I created is NapKim Math. Surprise, surprise. And that just allows you to kind of separate your different data sets. If I had more than one, I could click up here and select which one I want to go to. And that is your project. Now, whenever you select your project, it's going to show up in your Explorer down here. And it'll have a bunch of different things. It'll have all of these at the very beginning. And so those are just different ways of being able to look at or access your data. I'm going to be showing you how to create a new data set a couple different ways. And so I had already created, to make it a little bit easier, tables with all my references in here. And I connected to all but one of the played data in our sheets. So that way we could look at them together. So first let's look at our reference tables. We have all of them listed in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, oh, you know what? We made a change to our voucher reference table, which shows up in here. We can look at the details. It has the project, the data set, and then the table name, how much storage it takes up, all of that fun stuff. If I go to preview, it'll show me what it looks like. It's not in any order, but it shows the data set. But let's just say we forgot to add something and we need to add that back in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that. You always got to be careful when you're deleting. And now that goes away within our data set. And to add it back in, I'm going to click on these three dots over here, create table, and I'm going to create table from, and then I'm going to do upload. Now I'm going to take my screen share away for a second so that I can go in my browser and get the right file. And of course it had moved away from where it was. Okay, so I can move back to the browser. So you see that our CSV voucher reference is in there now, and it automatically changed our file format to CSV, which is comma separated value. It's basically like a spreadsheet that a lot of different systems are able to use very easily. It's automatically going to be in the project that I'm in, so that's NapKim Math. If you have multiple projects, you can browse to get to a different one. Because I clicked on the three dots next to reference tables, it's showing up in our reference tables dataset. And now I'm going to type in the table name of voucher reference. And I'm going to keep it as a native table. That's my only option. And then our schema basically tells you what columns are there. You can either auto detect or you can type them all in and add different descriptors, what type of data it is, if it's nullable or not, the max length. For something like this, I always do auto detect because that'll make it super easy for me and I can always go back in and change the descriptions later. I don't need a partition because this is a small table. If I was capturing a very, very large table and I wanted to make it easier to query, I would consider adding a partition. And so basically that allows you to look at if you're querying a smaller chunk of data, if you have a filter in your query. So say that you're filtering by ingestion time and you have that partition and that can, like, if you say I only want to look at the partitions that are greater than April 11th, so basically what's today, then that would allow you to just look at that subset of data. And thank you so much for the follow. But it's super helpful when you have large tables, but since these are not large, we're good. Clusters can also help with that when you don't have a date column or you have a very large data set that you need to partition by date, but also has different basically fields that you want to order by. And so that can be useful. We're not going to need that in anything we do. Tags we don't have to worry about, but I am going to go down to our advanced options. You have a couple different options. You can write it to an empty table, which is what we're going to do. You can always add it, which is append to a table, to an existing table, or you can basically say, whatever data already exists in this table, I'm going to replace it with what I'm uploading. So I'm just going to keep that as write if empty. We don't want any errors. And then we go down here, because we do have headers, we always skip, mistype, one row. That will make sure that it captures the column names as our headers. And then because some of this data does have new lines in it, sorry, it keeps scrolling me up to the top. I'm going to click quoted new lines and also jagged rows if there's some empty data in some of the fields. And none of these we have to worry about, so I'm going to go ahead and create our table. Oop. And what does it not like? I think, okay, yeah. I was trying to, there we go. Just delete this, and there we go. I thought just unclicking it would be fine, but there we go. And now our table is created, and so we can go to our table. We see all the different column names that we had. Details, we just uploaded it. I'm on the East Coast, so Eastern time, and our preview shows what data we want to see. And before I get into how to query, I'm going to also show you how to create a table from a Google Sheet. So in our played data, the one data set that I haven't updated yet in there is the run data. And so you have to make sure that your Google Sheet is set to public for anyone who has a link, otherwise it's not going to find it. And so I'm copying my URL and then going in our played data, clicking on the three dots and creating a table. And so you create your table if you want to do it directly from a Google Sheet from your drive. You click paste your URL. Your format is going to be a Google Sheet. And then the sheet range, you want to specify the name of your sheet exactly as it is, and it's case sensitive. So we're going to type in run. We have the project and dataset already in there because we clicked on those three dots. And so table we're going to call run. We're going to auto detect our schema again. Go down and I don't know why it keeps bumping me up to the top. Header rows to skip is 1. This looks a little bit different than the CSV, but we're all good. Do the same thing with quoted new lines and jagged rows, and then that will create our table. So we just created some data. Now, I do want to make sure I show you, I created these two data sets earlier. I'm going to create a new data set now to show you how it's done. You just click on those three dots, select create data set, and I'm going to say played data views, which I'll get to in a minute, but that way it'll show you how exactly to do that. We want to just be in a region. I clicked one that has low CO2 to make it a little bit easier. And we don't need to select any of these. If you want your table names to be case insensitive, go ahead, go to the danger zone and click this. But I'm going to skip that. And all of these I'm going to leave as default. And so now that'll show up in here. And because it's brand new, we can't expand it to see any of any tables. Now, in our play data, I'm going to open up what that table looks like. Now, it's going to look a little bit different than our data that we're actually storing. So let me actually pull one of those up as well. I'm going to click a new tab so they show up side by side. Otherwise, they're going to look weird, or one of them is going to replace the other. So I'm just going to bring up stake reference. We see that we have our details in our preview where we can see the data. Well, for anything that you bring in from a Google Sheet, you can see your schema, you can see your details, but you cannot see any of your data. And so what I'm going to show you right now is how to create your first query. If you click on query, it will create a new one for you. And if it's a little bit easier, what you can also do is click on the drop down up here and split tab to the right. So you can look at your schema at the same time as writing your query. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller to give these guys a little bit more room. Now we have the basics of a SQL query written automatically from hitting that query button. However, it's telling me that there's an error, and that's because our select list is empty. We have to tell BigQuery what columns we want to return. Now, I don't usually advise about doing this, but we're going to select star. That means all the different columns, we just want to return everything. Because this spreadsheet is not very large, I'm okay doing that, but you never want to do that for a very, very large data set. Our limit will tell us the max number of rows we want to return. So if we had 5 million rows, it would only return the first 1,000 that it found. However, the limit will not change how much processing, how much data you're processing. So you always want to be careful with that you're not trying to use that as a way to reduce your costs, because it won't. I actually don't need this for this data set, so I'm going to hit run. And let me make this larger. So it's going to show you your output at the bottom down here. And you can see that everything that we populated is populated correctly. Our drop-downs are comma separated lists. However, all of our data that we have placeholders for that we haven't filled out yet is null. Because we do have information in there about those rows, that is something that will happen if you have extra rows that are pre-populated with formulas or something to help you out. And so what we can do is we can filter this data, and you filter a SQL query using a where clause. And I'm going to look at one of my columns that I know should never be null in something that we know we're populating. And in this case, the win column is perfect for that. We could use the Joker name. However, that would not bring us the results that we want, because if we don't win, our Joker name will be null. Or if we win without having any Jokers, that would be null too. That's never going to happen with me, but you never know. There might be a challenge that actually does that. So we're going to do where our win column, which should always be populated for runs that we played. We can do is not null. And so we can run that. And that's only going to bring back those 3 rows that we know are populated. Another way that we can do it, if we're not sure which columns can be null or not, is we can say, okay, let's bring back the information for the first 3 runs. So I can type in my run ID, and we want that to be less than or equal to 3, because less than because we have 1, 2, 3, but also make sure you have your equal sign. You can use those less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and we can show that, and that'll bring back the same thing. And you can also say, all right, that was fun. Now let me see where our stake name, all the rows that are in the white stake. So I can say the stake name equals, and then put in single quotes, type out exactly what I expect, white stake. And that'll bring back our first 2 rows that are white stake. Now let's say, oh, I don't care about white stake. Let's look at any row that isn't white stake. So there are a couple different ways you can do basically not equals to in SQL. I prefer the brackets like this. So you have your less than sign and then your greater than sign. That's what I prefer. And we'll run that. And that brings back our 1 red stake row. What's interesting though is you notice we didn't have to do anything with nulls, because when you say something is equal to or not equal to, it's assuming that it has a value, and you don't need to specify that it shouldn't be null. Now what we can do is I'll show you one more thing, and it's I'm going to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to close this. I'm going to make it a little bit easier to use this run table. Now, even though we're not storing the data in BigQuery, we still have those extra rows. And so I'm going to create what's called a view, where that way I can basically store what query I would normally use to access that data to make it easier to actually use it in the future. So if I'm always doing the same query over and over and over again, I can create a view to make it much easier for me to be able to access that data. So I'm going to start with my query. So same thing that we were doing, select everything from our run table. So you can see that it has our project, our data set, and our table name. From there, and one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we're doing is using where our win is not null. And that way we can use this over time, and it'll change anytime that the underlying data changes. And that way you don't have to have that less than or equal to 3, where that would just bring back the first 3 rows every single time, no matter what extra data is added in. So this is the data that we want to run over and over and over again. So I'm going to put this in parentheses, and I'm going to say create, and I always like to say or replace, because it helps me make sure that I'm doing things correctly. However, you also want to make sure that you're not replacing something you don't want to get rid of. So always be careful with that. And we're going to say we're creating a view, and then we're going to give it our view name. So we type in where we want it to go, always starting with the project. and then we created that played data views data set. You can hit enter and it'll put it in there, even though it ended up putting an extra quote in there. And then you give it the name that you want to create. So I'm going to say, in this, we can call it run, and it'll be separate from the run that's in our played data. So it's going to be in our views, and it's going to be a separate view. And so then I'm going to put as, and that will tell me the query that I want to use to create it. And I'm going to put these in single quotes. And then I think I spelled something wrong. Let me try this again. So we're going to have NapKim math. We're going to have our played data views, and then our run view. Did I not set that up in the, yeah, it is in the US, so I'm not sure why it's giving me that error. Oh, thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate it. Welcome. We're doing some fun data from the Balatro game, and I'm showing how to create some data in BigQuery. So we're having a lot of nerdy fun. You all joined at just the right time. We're showing how to create a view based off of our data set that we built in Google Sheets with all free tools. And I'm actually having a little bit of trouble because it's telling me that my data set is not in the US, and it is. So I'm going to put this in a different data set for now that I know that I've already created. And so we're going to put it in our played data, call it run view, and that should tell us that we're good to go. For some reason, it's not liking the data set I created. I must have done something a little bit wrong there. But so we're creating our view that allows us to run the same query every single time to make it easier to access the Google Sheet data that will have nulls in the rows that we didn't put in yet. So now that I have this all set up, I can hit run. And it created our view. We can go to our view, and it has the same information as our Google Sheet, all the same fields, and it tells us what types of fields those are. Our details are going to be, we're going to have our query that creates the view down here, and we still don't have a preview because we're not actually storing any data. So this is actually a fun way to make sure that you're not duplicating any data and that you're able to use the same queries over and over again. And so we're going to select star to see everything within that, no limit. And because we have that null in our where clause, it only returns those 3 rows. And so this is a good way to first connect to Google Sheets, knowing that you're going to be adding data over time, and have it filtered down from the very start. Now, we just created a view. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I love watching people be good at things too. And thank you all so much for the follows. I really appreciate it. We can create tables the same way that we can create views. And so say we wanted to create a table that we're actually storing in the same way. We would just change create or replace view to create or replace table. We'd have our table name. So in the played data space, our run table. Same format where we have as and then what our query is. And if we run this, it'll create our table. If we go to our table, it's actually storing that data now. And you would be able to see in your preview all the data there as well. So what would this data set tell us? This data set, we're going to be running a bunch of analytics to be able to see like what jokers we end up getting the most stickers on, or what poker hands give us the most average chips. We're building this out long term to be able to analyze Balatro stats and get better at my gameplay. I'm not an expert at playing Balatro, but this may be able to help me understand some insights into how to improve, because I always want to get better. And so the plan is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I always code through vibes. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll be playing Balatro at 6 p.m. Eastern. And on Saturdays, we're going to be doing the data and SQL fun. Yeah, I play and code on vibes as well. That gets me through life. Have a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, vibes and watching a lot of Balatro. Well, let me tell you all. I know you all came in recently. I created this data set. Has a ton of different ways you can look at it. So we have like our run data, round data, and I started off with way too much data, and so it was taking me way too long to be able to like track all this, because I'm doing it all myself, rewatching my videos and inputting it manually. I did try to make it easier on myself by creating drop downs with reference data, but I realized that um, I had to scale back a little bit. It's not going to be everything I want, but I might be able to, with maybe some of my coworkers, figure out a mod or something that allows me to save the data that I want. Oh yeah, definitely. Having this for multiplayer would be fantastic. Sorry. Yeah. I always love learning, and I love improving my own skills, and so this was a way to kind of make sure that I practice what I preach and could show people how to do what I love to do, and also get better and have fun at the same time. We're chill, having fun, and all learning. And I really appreciate the questions and comments. Got more people coming into my stream and a couple more followers, and I really appreciate that. I just started streaming last Saturday, and so I really appreciate it. I'm having a lot of fun. And I hope you all are too. So we've only actually tracked 2 runs. I have data in the run sheet for the 3rd run, but I haven't gotten to inputting that data in the spreadsheet yet. And so there's not going to be a ton that we can tell right now. I wish I had an art brain. I am not creative at all. I like to joke that my creativity is like things like paint by numbers, or cross stitch calculated crafts, because I can't actually be creative myself. So I have a lot of respect for people who are creative. But yeah, I mean, you saw when I tried to create the view, it just didn't like the region that my data set was in. So I will say that I was a little scared to do this for the first time because I didn't know what would happen. But it is fun. I am going to be saving all of this in GitHub as well. Both the, like, I'm calling them napkins because NapKim math, of like basically the base code that you would use to be able to do everything that we're showing. And then any of the other code that we're creating for Balatro we'll keep in there as well. I used to be that way where coding fully breaks my brain, but then I discovered SQL. I never understood like Java or C++, but I love SQL. It's very logical, very straightforward, and so that's why I enjoy doing it and showing it to other people. Very nice. Um, and so let's see. We've created a couple tables, and so I think for the last thing we're going to do today, I'm going to show you how to do a join. So that's when we are combining two different tables or views together to be able to derive insights from the combination of the two. So let's see. I didn't really think about what I wanted to do for the joins, but we're just going to roll with it. Let's look at I think our hand data is going to be the most interesting. And we'll click this to query it. So when I'm joining, I always have a table that I want to join from. And so I'm just going to put select one as a placeholder for now because that way the query will stop yelling at me. Tell me that it will run and it'll just bring back a 1. And now I'm going to do an inner join. So that's going to tell me everything that is in common between the two tables. It's just like a Venn diagram. I'm going to inner join to our poker reference. And when you do a join, you have to tell BigQuery how you want to join them together. You can't just say, join these two tables together, figure it out. You have to say, I want them to be joined together on these columns. And before I do that part, I'm going to alias them to make it a little bit easier on myself so it knows which table I'm talking about. So my hand table, I'm just going to call as H. My poker reference table, I'm going to call as P. I always pick 1 or 2 letters because it makes it a lot easier to type out. And now I'm going to use on. So that says the columns that I want to join together, I'm going to join on. I'm going to start with H. It'll bring up a list. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I used to be a math teacher, so all fun. And it brings up a list of all of our columns. And so I'm going to choose the poker name because that's what we want to use in both of our tables. And then I'm going to say that's equal to P dot, and then our, let's see, poker name. I named it the same thing. And so you can say, because those two are in common between the two tables, that's what I'm going to join them together on. And very nice. An art teacher. I have a lot of respect for art teachers. They I never understood their ways. Now, because these have the same name, you can actually, instead of using on, I'm going to comment this out using a double dash. You can also use using and then put whatever the column names are in common within parentheses. When you're joining, they have to, if you are joining on multiple columns, they have to have all the same names. Otherwise, you have to use an on. But if you're just joining on one column and they have the same name, this is a great way to do it. If they had 2 columns you were joining by and they were both by the same name, you would do comma and then whatever your column name 2 is. And so this will bring back all the poker information for each of our hands. And so I'll show you what this looks like currently. And I'm going to limit it to the first 10. rows to make it a little bit easier. Oh, it thinks one of my columns is a date in my hand table. So I might have to figure out oh, actually, let me use a where clause because it's not liking, I think, some of the null rows. So we're going to have a where, and then, yes, it is 3:20 here on the East Coast. Let's see, our hand, what cannot be null? Oops. So our round ID is one column that we know is never going to be null. So now we're going to say where our round ID is not null within our hand table. And if that doesn't work, we might just need to, yeah, we might have to re-bring in our hand data, and that's okay. I think I might have made a change after I connected that to BigQuery. So instead of that, let's get our round data, changing it on the fly, and use our, let's see, we have our blind names, so we can bring in our blind reference table and change that to blind reference. I'm going to get rid of this. And we're going to use our blind name, which will tell us whether it's small blind, big blind, all of that. That should be the same in both tables. Yes, because that is blind name there as well. And I'm also going to add in where our round data, because we're inputting that is not null because we do have those placeholders at the end. And it doesn't like that because I need to say in our round table, all of these are populated. I'm going to say let's say where the blind name is not null, because that definitely should not be null. Blind name is not null. However, we actually don't need that because we are joining on the blind name, and it's not going to join nulls to nulls. But it's always best practice to make sure that you're bringing back non-null information as well. So this is bringing back our first 10 rows. And so we have our using column first, and then it has all of our information from our round table. So our round ID, our run ID, anti-ID, our round within a run ID, what tag was there, the effect of that tag, whether we played or not, score, all of that. And then after it gets through all of the columns in our round table, it appends all the columns within our blind reference table. So we have our ID, the description, the minimum ante it can show up on, what you have to score at least to be able to beat the blind. And so whether it's a boss blind or a finisher blind, and so you can have all the information there as well. And for funsies, let's take the join off, keep the limit on there, or the not null on there, and then look at what tags came up the most. So we're going to put in our tag name as the column that we want to look at. We can do count star. So that's saying count how many times there is a row in this table with that tag name. And then we have to group by. Can't type today. And we can either group by tag name. So you can either list out the column names. That's basically going to be the combination that will create one row, or your grain. Or you can do 1, which is your first column in your select statement. If you had it in the reverse order, you would put 2. Or you can also do group by all, which is great when you're dealing with a ton of columns and you know that you're creating 1 row per whatever you want. You can also alias your count, so count of tags, and it'll output that for you as well. And I usually don't like to order by, but to make it a little bit easier to see, we're going to order by, and then our count of tags is our second column, and we can say descending, so the highest number first. Now we can then also say if there's a tie, we're going to look at 1, which is our tag name, ascending, so just in alphabetical order. And I'm also going to put another constraint because we don't want the null tags basically for our boss blinds to come back. So we can say and tag name is not null. If you have multiple constraints, you use an and, where it has to be not null for both. If you only cared if one of them was null or not, you could use an or. And if you ever use an or in your code, always use parentheses because otherwise it'll mess you up. I've fallen victim to that many times. Always use parentheses when using an or. And it doesn't matter because everything has to be true. But with ors, if either one or the other has to be true and you have multiple constraints, then you are looking for trouble. So we're going to run this. And we can see that in our first 2 runs, our double tag actually came up the most. And let's actually, to be super fancy, we can do an inner join our tag reference. We can just start typing. And once that pops up, hit tab and it'll show up there. For some reason, it keeps only putting 1 quote. We're going to join using our tag name. And because I put the quote in the middle of the word reference. And then let's see, I'm going to go into here and go to our tag reference and make sure. So the tag benefit is what I want to pull back. That tells you what each tag does. And so I'm going to put our tag benefit here. Always separate your column names you want to pull back with commas. And I'm going to change this now because this is column 3. I'm going to change order by 3. Still, if there's a tie, order by tag name in alphabetical order. And because we have our group by all, it groups by both your tag name and your tag benefit. So if for some reason there were multiple benefits per tag or something like that, there would be 1 row per combination of those. And so one thing that we don't need to do, but I always like to do, is add our aliases to the beginning. And so because we're using, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to type in our alias dot, and that tells us what table it's getting that information from. And so we don't put it in our using, but in our round, our blind name is from our round table, and our tag name, we want to make sure that our tag name in our round table is not null. Our tag reference won't have any nulls, so we don't need to worry about that. So, dun dun dun. Now we can see the tag name, the benefit, so it gives a copy of the next tag selected, how many times it appeared in our first 2 runs. And magic! You get some interesting insights. Now, I know a lot of this was pretty basic stuff. For me, it was SQL magic. I love showing people how really easy it is to do this. I will be adding resources both in my GitHub and I'll add some of the links on my website as well. So feel free to check it out. Like, subscribe. Links are in everywhere I'm streaming this right now. Um, pretty basic, sure, Jan. Yeah, so I'm a business intelligence engineer, so for me this is some of the basic stuff, but um, you all can see that it's actually pretty easy. Like, you don't need to be scared by it. When I first started learning this stuff, I was like, "Oh no, I'm learning how to code." Like, I've always tried to avoid it. I don't know if I can do it. I have a math brain, but I don't know. But like, SQL to me is very logical, and so I do feel like once people get over the fear of it, they realize that it's really fun and really easy to do. And so just know that, like, you can do anything you set your mind to. I used to tell my students when I did teach that um, a lot of people are afraid of math too. But like, do you think that LeBron James goes out and shoots 100 free throws, well, 1,000 free throws the night before a big game, and that's all the practice he does? No, he practices consistently, takes time off every now and then. But that's how you get better at it. I definitely was awful at it when I started, but I just kept practicing every day. I would at work, the first 20 minutes I was at work, I would just explore different data and try out different queries to learn. And so that also helped me understand the data behind it. And so a lot of this is just like thinking logically how to apply that to data and being able to play with your data a little bit more, um, in a little bit more complex way than what you can in spreadsheets. But it's all stuff that I do feel like anyone watching you can do if you set your mind to it. And I'm always happy to help. So just let me know. Yes, the real reason for NapKim Math is teaching everyone to play with your data, um, because you can create data from anything. Um, oh, awesome! Helps with confidence approaching this. Yeah. And feel free to drop by anytime. Um, Always happy to help answer questions. Love the chatter. This It helped give me confidence today because I was really nervous, since this is the first time I was going to be coding on screen. Um, but yeah, like, subscribe, follow. I post in a couple different places, whatever you're most comfortable with, and make sure to tune in next time. I'll be on Tuesday at 8 p.m. I'll be, or sorry, 6 p.m. Eastern. I will be playing Balatro, same thing on Thursday, and then next week back at it at 2 p.m. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Um, you all have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next time.